welcome to From the South. I'm Laura Prada from the Telesur Studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with our news. You stay with us. Electoral campaigning has come to a close in Bolivia ahead of this Sunday, October 20th presidential election. Our correspondent in La Paz, Freddy Morales, has more details about the preparations regarding this election. Welcome, Freddy. Please update us.
The situation here in La Paz ahead of the elections is very calm. No problems have been reported in the delivery of the election materials to the voting centres. This process began at the beginning of the week to reach the most remote rural areas and ensure that everyone can cast their ballot on Sunday. The Electoral Tribunal has had meetings with various delegates from international observer missions. More than 230 election experts from around the world are taking part to accompany the vote. They will be present not only in the 9 departmental capitals, in the main cities, but also in rural communities, and the Electoral Tribunal is giving a lot of importance to this. You will remember that for the first time, these elections are using a voter registration that has been audited by the Organization of American States. That was something that the opposition was demanding for several years, and now is being put into practice for the first time. Of course, the opposition now says it doesn't trust the work done by the OAS. More than 20,000 members of the armed forces and police will be deployed at all of the 15,000 or more voting centres to ensure security. From midnight on Wednesday, all kinds of campaign propaganda have been forbidden from all 9 candidates hoping to be elected president for the next period. On Sunday, voters will also elect members of the Senate and lower house, also for a period of 5 years.
Thank you, Freddy. We'll see what happens this Sunday 20th in Bolivia. Now we move on to the Caribbean and we go to Haiti, where funerals quickly turned to heated protests when police fired air shots at hundreds of mourners in an attempt to stop a funeral procession near the presidential palace. A protest broke out when presidential guards tried to block a road near where hundreds had gathered around the coffins of 2 victims who had died in the past weeks of demonstrations. A group of mourners retaliated by setting a vehicle on fire, and police responded by firing dozens of rounds as most of the crowd took cover. The injured were taken to hospital, and funerals for 11 of at least 20 people killed were held in various cities, including the capital, Port-au-Prince. Protesters forced Haiti's president to hold a private ceremony to commemorate the death of Jean-Jacques Dessalines, one of the country's founding fathers. Hundreds of armed police officers locked down the surrounding area, while protesters who demanded President Jovenel Moïse's resignation began to assemble. Demonstrators had prevented Moïse from visiting the site where Dessalines was killed and where a public ceremony is usually held. Before leaving the private venue, President Moïse spoke briefly with the media, indicating that he is making moves to end his country's corrupt political and economic system, as he urged unity and dialogue with the opposition.
I am calling on Haitians need to unite to fight this system.
The longer Jovenel Moïse stays in power, the angrier the younger generation is getting. One day we will get Jovenel Moïse at the National Palace.
And now we change topic. The Cuban president, Miguel Diaz-Canel, is in Mexico for an official visit. The Cuban president was welcomed by President Andrés Manuel López Obrador at the National Palace in Mexico City. The 2 leaders held a closed-door meeting, but before this meeting, Diaz-Canel said that the government of Mexico has shared decades of friendship with the people and the government of Cuba, and that Cuba is interested in working alongside with Mexico on projects that benefit both countries. For his part, the Mexican president also said he welcomed the visit and regarded in the same addition made the same comments that President Diaz-Canel made.
We will continue to strengthen our relations and forge policies in keeping with the tradition of respect for the Cuban people, their independence and their right to self-governance. This has been our mandate, and this is what is written in our Constitution.
We keep moving from topic and we move now to Venezuela, because Venezuela has been elected as member of United Nations Human Rights Council for the next 3 years. There were celebrations at the UN General Assembly as Venezuela won with 105 votes. The Assembly chose 14 new members for the Council, which is made up of 47 countries. They will take up their seats in the month of January. From Latin America and the Caribbean, Brazil was also elected with 153 votes. President Nicolás Maduro regarded this election.
I want to congratulate Venezuela. Today we had a great victory at the United Nations in New York. Venezuela had been elected by the world for a permanent seat on the United Nations Human Rights Council. It's a victory of the diplomacy of peace.
And we continue talking about Venezuela because talks continue between the Venezuelan government and opposition sectors. One of the main issues on the table is the preparation of elections for next year. But the far right in the National Assembly seems to be blocking the progress. Our correspondent in Caracas, Madeleine Garcia, has the details for us.
The anti-democratic opposition in Venezuela's National Assembly repeats endlessly that they want presidential elections as the culmination of the adventure they embarked on when Juan Guaidó declared himself president. They've told the world this is the only solution for Venezuela.
Presidential and parliamentary elections at the same time set the date and will nominate a new electoral council.
It is a contradictory demand, because time marches on and they won't even discuss the election of a new electoral council. This is a necessary step towards legislative elections, which are the only ones contemplated in the Constitution for next year.
Everyone in Venezuela can see what they are doing. If they refuse to act, we will denounce them publicly for not seeking solutions. The PSUV group took a positive step by rejoining the Assembly. Now they need to step up so that we can elect a new CNE. If not, the Supreme Court will have to step in and take the decision.
The parliamentary committee that should be discussing the preparations for elections is the one chaired by Stalin Gonzalez, second vice president of the National Assembly. But he hasn't turned up in recent days. He was caught on camera in the United States and at a baseball game in Washington.
Everyone in Venezuela can see what they're doing. If they refuse to act, we will denounce them publicly for not seeking solutions. The PSUV group took a positive step by rejoining the Assembly. Now they need to step up so that we can elect a new CNE. If not, the Supreme Court will have to step in and take the decision.
Before a new electoral council can be elected, the National Assembly needs to overcome its breach of the Constitution by removing the candidates who were elected through fraud, then reach an agreement between the opposition and the Chavistas. But the body language doesn't look good.
This shows how fragmented the different opposition currents are. Some of them just want to keep their seats in the Assembly. Others are only interested in getting rid of the president.
Very soon, we will have elections for the National Assembly. And then we'll see if the imperialists will let their servile lackeys of the right take part or not. We are ready for the elections because the Venezuelan revolution is democratic, constitutional, and rests on the will of the people.
Meanwhile, talks are advancing with democratic and non-violent sectors of the opposition. A working group has been set up to draw up proposals for a new National Electoral Council and to discuss election safeguards and a system of proportional representation for minority parties.
And from this story from Venezuela and how this dialogue table is taking place, we go for a first break here from the South. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Telesur English and on my account at Laura P. Telesur. Just stay with us. We are back with our news. In Colombia, students have been protesting against President Iván Duque's plan to reform laboral and pension laws as well as privatization proposals. The students, trade unions and indigenous organizations took to the streets across Colombia's most important cities. The Colombian Education Workers Federation said the measures will affect young workers and weaken pensions. The protesters also reject the government's failure to comply with 2016 peace agreements and the continuing murder of social leaders across the country. And now we move on to Peru, where protesters both for and against the Constitutional Court of the country dissolving Congress gather across the court in Lima after it announced that it will make the decision on October 29th. Peru's Constitutional Tribunal rejected the addition of a member elected by the opposition-controlled Congress shortly before it was dissolved by President Martín Vizcarra. The court president, Ernesto Blume, read a statement to the press on Thursday stating that Gonzalo Ortiz de Ceballos would not be sworn in although he was elected in September 30th. Vizcarra dissolved the opposition-controlled Congress last month and called for new elections, saying the step was needed to uproot the nation's endemic corruption. Defiant opposition lawmakers voted to suspend him from office and moved to replace him with one of Peru's vice presidents who recently broke ranks.
We have come to support the decision taken by the Constitutional Tribunal that democracy be respected, that the Constitution be respected.
And now we move on to Brazil, where environmental disasters continue to happen. This Thursday, an oil spill has polluted at least 150 beaches across 9 different states. They all reached tourist beaches, including Maragogi in Alagoas state, and residents and environmentalists have continued their efforts to remove the oil from the water. Unfortunately, the cause of the spill is yet to be determined.
We have tourism here who want good services. They want to see the beautiful beach known as the Brazilian Caribbean.
And we move on to Guyana, where the High Court has thrown out an application filed by the opposition for an order mandating that the cabinet, including the president, resigns. In delivering the ruling, the acting Chief Justice deemed the opposition's action wholly misconceived, vexation, and absolute abuse of the court. The Court of Justice order cost to the respondent in the sum of $500,000 Guyanese dollars, which is about $2,400 US. The president has set March 2nd, 2020 for the holding of elections. The cabinet has continued in office as a caretaker government since the passage of a no-confidence motion against the government last December. The High Court struck down the opposition's claim that the Caribbean Court of Justice had overlooked a compulsory order compelling the president to resign. And now we move on to Trinidad and Tobago, because Prime Minister Keith Rowley has explained that the country's foreign exchange problems cannot be resolved anytime soon. Speaking just over a week after his government delivered a $53 billion Trinidad and Tobago's dollar budget, he said Forex remains a challenge.
We have to manage our consumption of foreign exchange, because if we spend it out and cannot earn it back, then that's a kind of bankruptcy, which makes us a pariah in the international financial community, which is why the yardstick is that you need to have enough foreign exchange for 3 months cover. That means and you're on the edge there, on the margin. If you go below 3 months, well, you're technically in big trouble. If you're just above it, that's not comfortable enough. We had up to 9 to 12 months cover when we had a lot of cash, earning a lot of cash, high oil price and so on, high gas price. But we don't have high oil price, we don't have high gas price.
So how many months cover do you have now?
We have about 7.5 months cover, which is well above the level of 3 months, which is the yardstick. We were told by some of the experts who sought to advise us when we came into office that we would have, if we did not devalue the currency to 8 to 1 or 10 to 1, we would, in paying our bills and managing our affairs, we would use up that foreign exchange reserve that we have inside of a year.
We continue in the Caribbean. Jamaica's Senate has approved 90-day extensions of the states of public emergencies across 5 parishes. This means the special security measure will now end in January 2020 in Westmoreland, Hanover and St. James and Clarendon and St. Catherine. The government says since the implementation of the measure in Clarendon 6 weeks ago, murders have declined by 80%. The Prime Minister is holding anti-crime talks with the opposition and civil society groups.
With the Prime Minister and approved an extension of the state's threat of guns,
which will address concerns, deliberate seriously the issues we face, and seek to create an uncontested political space in which there can be a national consensus on the crime-fighting plan for Jamaica. I think that is a positive step, a step in the right direction.
A Guinea court has suspended the trial of 8 opposition leaders accused of organizing protests against the President Alpha Conde. The 8 leaders were arrested on Saturday and charged with making statements to disturb public order by calling for demonstrations. At least 9 people were killed in 3 days of protests against the president's push for constitutional reform, which is seen as a way for him to seek a 3rd term in office. And South Africa was hit by power cuts for a 2nd day on Thursday as a state utility Eskom said a number of generating units were still out of service. Eskom noted that some of the units will not be up and running for a few days, and as a result, the utility said it would cut 2,000 megawatts of power from 7 a.m. until 11 p.m. local time on a rational basis across the country. On Wednesday, the rand fell as much as 1% against the U.S. dollar as the outages highlighted the challenges facing the country's economy. The cuts also affected supplies to Zimbabwe, where Eskom exports up to 400 megawatts daily. Time for a second and very short web break. Remember, you can find this and much more information on our website, closerenglish.net. You stay with us. Back with our news, Turkey has agreed to suspend its military operations in northern Syria to let Kurdish-led forces withdraw. U.S. Vice President Mike Pence made the announcement after he and high-level delegation held talks with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Ankara. Coming out of at least 5-hour-long meeting, Pence said there will be a pause in military operations for 5 days once the Kurdish forces have permanently left. Turkey said it will implement a permanent ceasefire, and the U.S. will withdraw recent sanctions it imposed on Turkey.
That today the United States and Turkey have agreed to a ceasefire in Syria. The Turkish side will pause Operation Peace Spring in order to allow for the withdrawal of YPG forces from the safe zone for 120 hours. All military operations under Operation Peace Spring will be paused, and Operation Peace Spring will be halted entirely on completion of the withdrawal. Our administration has already been in contact with Syrian Defense Forces, and we have already begun to facilitate their safe withdrawal from the nearly 20-mile wide safe zone area.
We will pause Operation Peace Spring in order to allow for the withdrawal of PKK-YPG forces from the safe zone for 120 hours. Not a ceasefire. We are only pausing. This is not a ceasefire. Ceasefires can be done only between two legitimate sides. We are only pausing the operation to allow the terrorist groups, which are the targets of the operation, withdrawal from the safe zone.
And a Russian flag was seen flying on a demolished building in Sormagare, a border town in Syria, which Kurdish militant groups controlled before the Turkish military offensive. Earlier on Thursday, Russia's foreign ministry spokeswoman said Syria will get control over its border with Turkey as part of any settlement of the conflict in the region. And now we move on to other topics. Thousands of Catalan students have taken to the streets in Barcelona in a fourth day of protest against the jail sentence handed out to independence leaders. After 3 nights of severe police repression against the protesters, Thursday march was largely peaceful. 97 protesters have been arrested since Monday, and the regional Catalan government has condemned violence by protesters. However, many students say the police are to blame.
It's really bad, because President Torra criticized the sentences and then sends the Catalan police, the Mossos d'Esquadra, to repress those who are fighting against the sentences. This is a super hypocritical, and what we demand is the resignation of the Catalan Interior Minister, Miguel.
The president's speech was terrible. They want to demobilize us. We need leaders. We do not have leaders. They do not support us.
And Israeli forces have fired tear gas and rubber bullets at Palestinians protesting against land seizures for Jewish settlements in the occupied West Bank. According to eyewitnesses, dozens of protesters were injured in the village Tumus Aya. Israeli protesters also gathered on a hill opposite to call on the government to build a new settlement. The Israeli government's expansion of Jewish settlements have blocked any peace talks for several years. And now we move on to other topics again. 5 years ago, China declared war on environmental pollution, and everything seems to indicate that it is winning. The Asian giant is advancing at a record speed in reducing and mitigating pollution. Let's find out more on the following story.
In the last 3 years, the country reduced by more than half its emissions of sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide from power plants. These are the components that contribute most to the harmful smog.
Anyone who has visited Beijing or other Chinese cities in recent years will really notice the improvement in the climate, in the air quality of the city. Although pollution persists, now we have bluer skies, and it's something we have to keep working on.
According to a specialized study, the Asian giant could meet its ultra-low emissions targets for 2020. Which will mean considerable health benefits for its citizens.
The Chinese government has taken many measures to control pollution in the country, from stopping polluting factories to promoting clean energy sources, such as the use of electric vehicles. For me, this is a very important issue, because we have a lot of people and this affects our health.
Addressing environmental pollution is currently a priority for the Chinese government, which this year will invest nearly $4 billion in preventing and controlling pollution.
Beijing is still one of the most polluted cities in the world, but I think in a few years that will change. It's my hope to be able to breathe cleaner and cleaner air.
China, which embarked on its course to become a major power long after other countries, has even sacrificed part of its rate of development to deal with climate change. It's an issue which is now just as important as economic growth or the fight against poverty.
And now we move on to other topics. Cuba's National Ballet has reported the death of Alicia Alonso at age 98. Recognized as the world's most famous dancer, she was co-founder of the Cuban School Ballet. Alicia Alonso received countless awards, among them the National Dance Prize in Cuba, the Gold Medal of the Circle of Fine Arts of Madrid in Spain, and the Alba Award of Arts. The Council of State of the Republic of Cuba awarded her with the José Martí Prize, the island's highest distinction. Alonso was acknowledged by leaders around the world during her artistic career. The death of the prima ballerina assoluta marks an end to a chapter in the history of universal dance. From Telesur, we pay tribute to her. You continue with Telesur, always connecting our global thoughts. Until next time, thank you for watching, and we'll leave you with these images from the prima ballerina assoluta Alicia Alonso.
¡Uy, estoy viva! ¡Estoy viva! Sigo viva y sigo bailando y sigo viviendo. Estoy viva, estoy viva. Sigo viva y sigo. Estoy viva, estoy viva. Sigo viva y sigo bailando y sigo viviendo. Estoy viva, sigo viva.